King Midas, Chapter 1. 1. The Gold Lover. Once upon a time, there was a Roman king called Midas. This king had a young daughter. She was beautiful and polite, and the king called her Golden Mariam. This name was because the king was a lover of gold. King Midas loved his daughter Mariam very much, but this love is nothing compared to his love of gold and wealth. This man was fascinated by his love of gold. He spent his days collecting it. He preferred it to everything in the world and did not think of anything else. His people gave him the nickname the Gold Lover. 2. Treasure of Midas. King Midas had a wealth of gold. It was a big pile in his palace. No one had ever collected such a pile before him. The love of gold kept him away from all joy and concern of the world, and he became unable to see anything other than pure gold. King Midas used to pass a long time every day in a dark basement in his palace to enjoy seeing his gold treasure. He had built that dark basement and hidden his treasure in it. No one could bear to stay in this dismal basement except King Midas. 3. Dreams of Midas. Whenever he entered his basement, he closed the door and locked it carefully. Then he looked into his treasure and started counting his dinars and gold bullions and carrying them to a small hole in the wall that sends a small sunbeam to delight his eyes by seeing the sparkle and brilliance. He did not see the sun being more valuable than that it reflects its lights on that precious metal, to which nothing in the whole world equals its preciousness and danger. He used to pass a long time counting his gold treasure, piling dinars over dinars and bullions over bullions. He used to turn pieces of gold in his hand and rubbing them between his fingers happily, saying to himself, "How lucky you are, Midas! How abundant is your wealth!" He was wrong about the first and right about the second. He was truly the richest person of his time, but despite his abundant gold, he was not happy, because his wretched soul was deprived of all kinds of happiness and joy. Midas felt that he was still poor, and he wished the whole world were a safe filled with gold, and his mind would not be at peace unless this wish came true. 4. A strange visitor. Midas sat in his basement after closing the door. He was deeply immersed in his admiration at the sight of his heaps of glowing gold as he saw a shadow approaching him. Midas looked at him in astonishment. He did not know how this strange visitor entered his basement as he had tightly closed the door. Midas realized that this visitor was not human, and he was certain that his guest must be a genie. 5. A conversation with the jinn. Midas looked closely at that genie, and he saw him as a young youth, his face as white as silver, and his hair as yellow as gold. That young man stood in the bright rays of the sun, and Midas smiled when he saw him. He imagined that he saw a pile of hot, glowing gold, which was beloved to him. The visitor looked around the room and thought, for a long time, of Midas's treasure of gold, bullion, and precious things. Then he turned to Midas and said, "How rich you are, my friend. I do not think that anyone in the whole world has such a treasure, and I do not know that a man was able to collect such an amount of money." Midas said, "You are right, my dear, and I do not think I deserve to be congratulated. It is not too much for me to gain this treasure, since I have spent my life collecting money." The strange visitor said, "What do you complain of, my friend? Aren't you happy with the money you've collected? Do you ask for more, my dear?" Midas was silent and gave a slight nod of his head, indicating his discontent, expressing his displeasure, distress, and boredom with his unfortunate luck. Then he sighed, eager to fulfill his wish. The genie said, "Tell me what you want. What satisfies you? Tell me your wishes, and I will fulfill all of them." 6. Midas's wish. Midas lowered his head for a short moment, then turned to his visitor. A wonderful idea came to him and captured his heart. and enchanted his soul. He said, "The thing that saddens me the most is that I devoted my life to collecting money. I did not see, after all this trouble and toil, that I had achieved anything but a little. Is there a way to fulfill my wish?" The genie replied, "I told you. Tell me about whatever wish. I will grant you whatever you wish." Midas rejoiced. His face beamed with joy, and his eyes sparkled with joy. Then he said to the genie, "I loved gold, so I would not accept any other substitute. I have only one wish, and that is, everything I touch to turn into pure, glowing gold." The genie said, "This is an unattainable wish, and I do not think that its fulfillment will satisfy you. I see that you think a little before I give you what you ask for." Midas said, "What do you say, my friend? Is there a better wish than this?" The genie said, "I am afraid that you will regret it if I fulfill your desire." Midas replied, "Be assured that I will not accept an alternative to this wish." Then the genie said, as he bid him farewell and moving away from him, "I have fulfilled your request. I will fulfill your wish at dawn tomorrow. Anything you touch will change into glowing gold." Chapter 2. 1. Fulfillment of the wish. As soon as the genie finished speaking, his face shone with light, and he disappeared. King Midas looked around and did not see anything in the room, except the sunbeam that was reflected on the gold bars he had spent his life collecting and saving. The legend did not tell us how Midas spent his night. Did he sleep or not? Did he stay up all night, dreaming of fulfilling the wish that the cute genie had promised? He was like a young child whose father promised him a beautiful toy that he would buy for him early in the morning. So, the child dreamed of this beautiful toy all night. Early in the morning, King Midas got up. As soon as he saw the first beam of the sun in his room, his wish became true. He was astonished to see that his quilt became pure shining gold. 2. Madness of joy. King Midas became mad of joy. He was about to lose his mind. His success made him forget everything. He began to run in his room and touch everything in it. As soon as he did, it turned to pure shining gold. Then, Midas touched one of the pillars of his bed, and suddenly, the bed became heavier and turned into a mass of gold. Then he hurried to put on his clothes, and no sooner had he done so, he saw that his clothes were all made of beautiful, soft golden cloth. He saw that it was easy to bend, light, and nice. He had touched his small handkerchief that his daughter, Golden Mariam, had bought for him, before it turned into fine gold, and its threads and drawings turned into gold. Then he took out his binoculars from his pocket and put them on his nose. But he was astonished and confused. He could not see anything with his binoculars. When he looked closely at it, he saw that his two lenses had turned into pure gold. However, Midas saw that his binoculars had become useless. Its value decreased and its price increased. King Midas said, "The two lenses were more useful to my eyes." He felt some anxiety and distress, but his joy at the fulfillment of his wish made him forget to think about anything else. Joy and happiness overwhelmed him that he thought he had become the happiest person in the world, and that his spacious palace was smaller than his joy and pleasure. Then he descended the stairs. He had barely touched the railing before they turned into gold, and as soon as he opened the garden door, the door also turned into gold. When he entered the garden, he saw the roses, the beautiful blooming flowers, and their fragrant scent wafted over him in the morning breeze. So he ran to them, touching them one after the other. He had hardly done so before all flowers turned into pure gold. 3. Mariam's complaint. It was time for breakfast, and the morning air had made King Midas hungry, so he returned to the palace. He looked for his young girl, the golden Mariam, and he did not see her sitting to have her breakfast, so he commanded to call her. After a few moments, he saw her coming, sad and crying. He was surprised. This was the first time he saw his daughter crying and sad, so he wanted to turn this sadness into joy and happiness. So he grabbed her mug, so it became of pure glowing gold. King Midas thought that this surprise would bring happiness and joy to his dear daughter, the golden Mariam, but he saw that she did not stop crying. Midas asked her, "What is wrong with you, my dear?" She said, "Look at this flower." King Midas said, "What a beautiful flower." Miriam said, "How ugly is it? I don't bear seeing it. It is the ugliest flower I've ever seen." Then Mariam resumed, saying, "Do you know what I faced today, Father? I went to the garden to pick a rose from its bushes. Do you know what happened? What a disaster that befell the beautiful garden. The roses in our garden have withered and turned yellow. They have not exuded the wonderful scent that filled all around with perfume and brought joy to souls. What's wrong with our garden? What disaster befell us regarding its roses and its beautiful, fragrant flowers?" Midas was ashamed of what had happened in his beautiful garden, and he did not dare to tell his daughter that he caused this disaster. He said to her with a smile, to make her forget her sadness for her dear rose, "Never mind, my daughter. I do not know why are you sad. Wouldn't you be happy to have a flower of gold that will last for hundreds of years without fading? Would you not be satisfied with it instead of a rose that does not stay for a day without withering? Take it easy, my dear, and drink this delicious soup." 4. At the table. Little Mariam sat to the table, and her sadness made her forget all the surprises and wonders around her. She did not notice that all the plates and dishes had turned into pure gold. Midas touched the cup of coffee. The cup turned into pure gold, and his happiness increased. He kept thinking about the means that would enable him to keep this cup. His treasures of gold are scattered everywhere now. He thought of a method to keep them all in a safe place. He was in deep thinking when he saw what was not expected at all. A strange thing happened. The king found that the coffee, which was in his cup, turned into liquid, glowing gold as soon as it touched his lips. Then it froze after a short time. It became a solid piece of gold. 5. The sadness of Midas. Midas was terrified and was in great pain. Sadness and anguish took over him. He shouted anxiously, "Oh, what a misery! What a confusion!" Then his confusion increased, and he was astonished as he saw that every food he touched immediately turned into pure gold. He also realized that he would not eat after today, and that he would surely die of hunger. So he looked at his daughter for a long time while she was eating her food deliciously. He said to himself, "How miserable I am. I see a lot of fresh and delicious foods, and I cannot taste any of it." Mariam felt that her father was sad, depressed, and unable to speak due to his grief. She loved him very much, so she was sad because of his sadness. She said, "Tell me, Father, what is wrong with you? I see that you are worried." Midas said in a sad voice, "May Allah help me, my dear daughter. I have been afflicted with troubles and tribulations. Your poor father does not know what the end of his miserable days will be." 6. The end of calamities. Oh dear child, have you heard in your life that a man has become as miserable and disappointed as this poor wretch? He sees the most delicious food in front of him, and he is unable to taste a single bite of it. Don't you see that the poorest of people has become richer than this king, and is happier and more comfortable than him? Don't you see that a piece of bread that a poor worker eats and a cup of water that he drinks equal the entire wealth of this unfortunate rich man, and more than everything he has? Don't you feel sad for him? So, listen, dear child, to the conclusion of the calamities and the final misfortunes that befell him. King Midas's hunger became intense. His thirst exhausted him. Confusion took hold of him. Pain took hold of him. And sadness took over him. So he kept shouting of pain. Mariam tried to know the secret of his pain and the source of his sorrows, but he did not say anything. She could not bear to be patient, and her love for her father motivated her. So she put her arms around his knees, and he leaned over her, kissing her on the forehead, thanking her for her kindness. No sooner had Midas kissed his daughter and thanked her for her love and compassion than he saw a strange thing. He shouted, terrified and frightened, "Answer me, my dear. Answer your father's call, O beloved and faithful Mariam." Midas had the last calamity. His dear daughter turned into a piece of gold when his lips touched her forehead. 7. The misery of the sad father. As soon as he saw what happened to his dear daughter, he cursed gold, treasure, and greediness that took him to a disaster. The face of that little girl turned from the red like a rose to the yellow of gold. Her face, a moment ago, was bright with life, overflowing with sincerity and love, but now it has become a bright yellow face. The rings of her beautiful hair turned into yellow gold rings. Her slim body froze in her father's arms. What a terrible calamity for this miserable and sad father. Dear Mariam has gone, her father's prey, and the child has turned into a statue of gold. Midas used to say all the time, "My daughter is worth her weight in gold." But now he feels in the wrong time that all the treasures of the world are not worth her tender heart. Now he sees that if the whole world was filled with gold, and heaps of gold were piled up to fill what is between the earth and the sky, these won't be equal to his dear daughter, Mariam. Chapter 3. 1. The genie returned. Midas thought for a long time and became deeply immersed in his thoughts, until the sadness almost led him to be stunned. He was immersed in his sorrows and pain when he saw the genie who was speaking to him yesterday standing in front of him. He lowered his head in shame and did not dare to speak to him. The genie said sarcastically, "Perhaps you are happy with the gold treasures you have gained, dear friend?" Midas said, "There is none in the whole world who is more miserable than me." The genie said, "Why are you miserable? I fulfilled what I promised. Didn't I fulfill your wish? So, what do you complain of?" Midas said, "Now, I believe that gold is not, as I thought, the most valuable thing in the world, and I am certain that happiness is something else." The genie said, "Your opinion has changed today, and I now hear from you what I didn't hear yesterday. Now, I ask you, so answer me frankly, which of the two things is more beneficial to you, filling the world with gold or a cup of fresh water?" Midas cried, "A cup of fresh water is more precious to me than all the treasures of the earth. How can I have it now? My throat is dry, and I almost dead of thirst. Yes, how sweet the water is. How great is its benefit to people. O blessed water, how can I find you?" Then the genie resumed saying, "Tell me, my friend, which of the two is more beneficial to you, filling the earth with gold or a piece of bread?" Midas said, sadly and anxiously, "A piece of bread will outweigh the treasures of the whole world." The genie said, "Then tell me, which of the two things is more beneficial to you, filling the earth with gold or your daughter Mariam?" Poor Midas cried out in remorse while biting his fingers. "Oh, how miserable I am. To me, All the treasures of the world are not equal to my dear daughter. 2. Conclusion of the conversation. Then the genie said seriously, "Now you have made sense, Midas, and have recovered from your error. I realize that the most trivial things that the poorest people cannot comprehend are more valuable than all the treasures of the earth. So, tell me frankly, do you want to go back to how you were and return to your old way of life?" Midas said, "There is nothing I love more than the fulfillment of this wish." The genie said, "You don't have to, my friend. Go to the stream that runs in your garden and bathe in it. Then, fill a vessel with its water and pour it over everything you want to return to its original state." The genie immediately disappeared. 3. Happiness after misery. Do not ask, dear child, about Midas's joy in what he heard from the genie, for he was overcome with joy. He did not waste his time. He quickly ran to a large jar and barely touched it until it turned into gold. Then he ran quickly until he reached the stream, where he threw himself into it. His joy made him forget to take off his clothes and shoes. Then he filled the jar with water, and the jar turned into pottery as it had been. He was pleased with that, and he felt completely happy. He got rid of that heavy burden. Then he returned to his palace and poured drops of water on his little daughter, Mariam, and she returned, as she had been, in good health, with rosy cheeks and cheerful face. Her face was full of life and beauty. The little girl was astonished to see her father wet her with water, but she did not know what had happened to her. King Midas hid the truth of what happened from his daughter, Mariam, so that he would not show her his foolishness and madness. Then he poured water on the rose bushes and flowers. The roses returned to their original state, and the garden became joyful, fragrant, and wonderfully beautiful, and pleasing to the beholders. 4. The conclusion of the story. Midas spent the rest of his life in happiness. He was carefree, at ease, and satisfied. Only one thing remained from the memories of this incident: his daughter's beautiful hair, which continued to shine bright like gold.